Welcome to the ATA podcast, where we talk to former elite athletes sharing their insights and wisdom derived from successfully transitioning into life beyond the game. Very warm welcome to the Athlete Transition Accelerator podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Cook today, an Olympic swimmer. He's been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and we're going to be delving into his journey and his wisdom and the life that he now leads in that chapter beyond elite swimming. Chris, a very warm welcome to you.
Oh, thanks very much. I've been excited about this one.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Now, I know we've met before. I know you're a humble guy. I know no elite athlete ever likes really talking about themselves or their career, but we're not going to allow you to avoid that discomfort to start with. So just to frame things, now, the journey you've been on is extensive. You've had many, many years at the top of the swimming game. So I think it's more appropriate for you to set the context of, you know, some of the highlights in particular. I know you're not going to like talking about yourself, but I think it's always nice for people who are tuning into the show to understand perhaps a couple of moments in that journey that really stand out for you, that give you a real sense of pride when you look back on your career.
Yeah. Okay. So where do I start? Well, actually, do you know what? I can just whistle stop and start right at the very beginning, just watching other athletes wanting to be an athlete myself. So watching Adrian Moorhouse win a gold medal for Great Britain in 1988. I sat watching the TV thinking, I want a piece of that. I can do that. And my granddad going, that's a bit of a lofty dream. Sunshine. And then just joining a swimming club and I'm watching my own kids do it now. I'm watching my 10-year-old son do it. And just I can see a lot of myself in him, you know, that kind of fight to want to win. And that kind of took me through my teens and into my early 20s, not really winning, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. I spent a lot of time learning to lose,
Right.
which at the time I didn't think was a skill. But now I look back and think, crikey, I was like really sharpening the axe there. As hard as it is, as painful as it is, I was actually sharpening the axe for what was about to come. Moved to the City of Newcastle Swimming Club, where they had an empire of a club, Olympians everywhere. You know, if you go back in history, they had them in the history books, and started working alongside people who were already walking that course. So for me, it was just it's a no brainer. And then found myself at the dizzy heights of the Olympics, Olympic finals in Athens and Beijing, and then the winning Commonwealth Games in 2006. I guess that was my kind of defining moment. Won the 50 meters breaststroke and the 100 meters breaststroke.
Fabulous.
Silver in the relay. So it was a good week in the office that week.
Yeah.
And then left the sport with looking back over a career that spanned nearly 10 years of international swimming. And it feels like someone else's story now. When I look back and he said, oh, give us a highlight. I was thinking, crikey, it does feel like somebody else's story because it was such a long time ago, but I've carried so much of that forward into this chapter.
And that, I mean, so it is a whistle stop when you look and again, like everyone we talk to, it's something I admire about elite performers. They've got that level of humility as well. And, you know, anybody that delves into your career, I'm pleased you mentioned it, you know, the Commonwealth Game medals, you know, two Olympics there. That's fabulous, fabulous memories for you. But already I'm smiling as I listen because you're starting to delve into those traits that carry forward. You're talking about dealing with adversity and sharpening the axe, as you said. So, again, I know there's multifaceted elements to this, but give us a little bit of an overview as to what you're doing now, because I know there's different dimensions to that. So, Chris, post-swimming, talk to us a little bit about what that entails.
So I kind of look back over the last 15 years since retiring, and I've set up businesses. So I've got a learn to swim business with over 1,000 kids swimming in our local area. So me and my wife run that one. It's really successful and, you know, just keeps growing and growing year on year. I run my own consultancy, so I work as a coach in business mainly. I've a really diverse range from NHS to transportation to medical instrumentation, you name it, even aviation industry. So it's coaching the person, not necessarily the industry, which I absolutely love. I'm also a public speaker, so I do a lot of getting up and speaking, sharing my keynote, which is called Two Lengths of the Pool, the best do less. So I've found in my career that actually the higher up the chain I went, people do less of the stuff that doesn't matter and more of the stuff that does. And I wanted to kind of just put a spotlight on that and get managers and leaders really focused on that bit. And that's been overwhelming. I thought it would last a year or two, and still 15 years on, I'm stood on a stage with a microphone, bump me gum still.
Bumping my gums. There we go. There's a little Geordieism coming through
Yeah,
for those
with that.
international listeners, which I love. There's a little bit of a regional colloquialism in there.
They'll know what I mean.
They do. They do.
Yeah, they will.
And I do a lot of work with on the periphery. I say on the periphery of sport, I'm still involved with Team GB in various different roles throughout the last couple of years, working on a program called the Ambition Program, helping athletes who are essentially just on the verge of making it. We take them to the games, get them a look around so that actually and there's a learning program that we put all around that, actually in 4 years' time, when they get their chance to have a go again, they can tick all of the things off the list that are at the Olympics that make it so crazy and special. They can go, done that, done that, done that. They get that experience before they actually go out and race. And I've been one of the mentors leading that program in Paris and a couple of Olympics before. So yeah, quite an eclectic range of skills I've kind of gathered over the last 15 years.
Diverse. And Carl, I can see you scribbling like my dad. I'm going to bring you in, but I suppose one point just to make before I hand over to you, Carl, there is the diversity. So I think listening to you there, Chris, what's exciting for me, thinking of the listeners and athletes that are still involved, is there are multifacets to what you're now doing. And so there doesn't have to be a one size fits all. You don't have to commit and say, all my eggs are in one proverbial basket. You've got the speaking, you've got the consultants, you've got the coaching, you've got the swimming, you've got the mentoring. So that gives you a very full diary, no doubt, but that they are multi roles, multi hats that you're wearing, which I think is an important message for people. You don't have to jump, exclusively into one area. You can blend things, experiment with things, find what resonates, and perhaps you'll specialize and niche down in one, or perhaps you'll continue as you've done with, a range of different things to keep you occupied.
Absolutely. And there are days when I think, oh, right, I should just go and get a job. I should specialize in this. And then there are other days where I'm like, well, I'd never do that, and I do have that pendulum swinging. So if people are sitting there thinking, what do I need to be, do, or have? Actually, in this moment in time, you don't necessarily need to be chasing that. You've got to bring alive what you really enjoy in that moment. And as hard as that is to do, especially when you're in a pickle, which I was, and I'm sure we'll get into it, it is just about having that confidence to step forward into the thing that actually just turns your head, piques your interest, pulls you in, just makes you lean in, that thing.
Yeah.
That there is the thing to follow.
Perfect.
I think that I love some of the stuff you just said there, Chris. I mean, like James said, I've just been scribbling down like a maniac over here. A couple of things that you've just mentioned resonates really highly with what me and James are doing here with ATA. And you've just mentioned essentially light to fire. And then I want to take it back to the Ambitions program as well, because I love the sound of the Ambitions program, where we're going to put these potentials into the world. So when the time comes that's their environment, there's no surprises. There's nothing going to catch them off guard. They've been there, they've done it, they know how to navigate it. And I think that kind of falls really nicely into what we're doing with ATA, albeit not an Ambitions program, but one of our goals is give athletes visibility to as many industries as they can. Just go and see it, go and live it, and then tell us whether you like it or not. Because it's just as important for you to say to us, don't like it, as it is to say, I really want to explore that in a little bit more depth. And I think what we're looking for is for them to come back to us to say, that's lit a fire in my belly. I love what they're doing there. So that resonates really highly with what you've just been talking about there. But I just want to take it back a little bit to when you were in your career. You've now got many strings to your bow. At what point in your career as an elite swimmer did you start thinking about what's going to happen next? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? When did that start coming as part of your sort of day-to-day preparation?
It happened in 3 phases for me. So the first phase was quite simple. It was me, mum and dad, actually. They said, look, we'll support you as much as you need support, and we just need you to get an education. That's all we need you to do. Because you could fall out of love with swimming tomorrow, you could break your leg, you could have a nasty injury, you could be the best swimmer and just not perform at that level, whatever's coming your way. So this was said really early on as I was kind of leaving school, going into college. And I would have been one of those guys probably who would have just gone, nah, let's just swim. Let's just do it. Let's just go for it. I'll worry about that sort of stuff later. And actually, as I was scaffolding in education, I didn't realize what I was actually doing. I was actually telling the world that I could educate to a level. It didn't matter about the degree I got. It didn't matter necessarily about the title. It was showing the world that actually I could do that and scaffold an Olympic career. So I had two things running at once. And when I got on the Olympic team and I looked around, everybody else was very, very similar, give or take. The huge demographic in the team had followed the similar route of almost scaffolding a rope as they're going up the mountain, so that actually if they had to come down, A, they could get back down, and B, they could get down safely. And I think that's really important. But I remember Gemma Lowe, when she was swimming, she picked up her A-level results the day she swam in an Olympic final, and she got like A stars. And I was just like, that is just crazy. But what a message it sends to the world, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I'm in an
100%.
and I've just got text from my auntie or my mum and dad, whoever it is, sending the results. And I was like, that is incredible. And that's the level of dedication that it took. The second phase was as I was going through my Olympic career, I started to then think, okay, well, maybe I need some experience as I go. Because if this goes on any longer and I get close to my 30s, actually, I'm going to spend 10 years of potentially not being employed, of being an athlete. So I started to volunteer. I started to look for opportunities that were not necessarily energy draining. Actually, they were really energy uplifting opportunities. Reached out all my contacts and just asked if they would provide me and help me with some experience. Some were paid, some were unpaid, but it was all to just help make me a little bit more of a rounded person. And the last phase was as I was kind of coming out of swimming, and that was just going at things with a mindset of I'm just going to experiment because experiments can't fail. They just give you results. It's really easy to go into things and go, oh no, I failed at that. Oh no, I failed at that. And I'm a failure. And actually, it's very, very easy for us to do that because as sports people, we do that really well. You pass or you fail. It's black and white. It's, left or right. There's no gray areas. And actually, I needed a slightly different viewpoint. And as I went into things, I went into personal training, I went into all sorts of different areas. I even applied for a job in a renewable energy company thinking I wouldn't get it, and I got it. and I was like, right, what am I going to do now? I don't even know anything about renewable energy, but I made a bit of a success out of that as well. But I went into them going, I'm just going to experiment because they can't fail. And that was my saving grace, I think.
Yeah, I love it. I love that. There's so many little pearls of wisdom, and I'm very visual, so I love that metaphor of the rope going up the mountain and having something to come back down. And I think indirectly, what you've done is what your parents did for you there, Chris. So some of us are blessed with having the parents that will give us that guidance, and some of us don't have that. So I think hearing you say it, that education was still important, even though you had this goal tantalizingly close that you were pursuing this career as an elite athlete, that it was still important to be thinking about life beyond sport. Education's a classic sort of, let's run that in tandem, because we've all been there and we see it. It's more prevalent in younger athletes. We all believe we're indestructible and that our career will go on forever. And we can think about life after sport as and when that arrives. So I think that was great to hear. The other thing that I really enjoyed hearing you say was reaching out to your contacts and just looking for experiences. Now, that's something we're really proactively pushing with people that we're talking to, that actually, who do you know? And who do the people you know? And before we came on to record here, we were talking about that theory that I was probably ruining about you're always so many calls away from anyone in the world. Well, in reality, that's probably true. So just dive back into that a little bit, Chris. Pardon the swimming pun, but what did you take out of that? Because Carl alluded to something earlier. We get a little bit of pushback and people say, well, what if I don't like things? Well, that's absolutely fine because you rule some things out, you rule some things in, you've got a smaller, more focused list of what you want to explore. So just how did that look in a practical context? Was that sort of you going out to have a coffee with people, just chatting about what they were doing? Were you shadowing people? How did you wrap that around your intensive training schedule?
It was a yes to all, really. There was moments when I would reach out to my contacts and just go for a coffee with them and just find out how have they done it? How did they retire from swimming and what are they doing now? it wasn't even swimming. Sometimes I was just contacting people who were football coaches. I would reach out to some of my contacts, just say, look, have you got contacts there? Because I want to speak to someone there. So just being just a little bit forward about it. I'm never pushy. I'm not really a pushy guy. I'm just really forward. And I always remember my granddad saying, look, if you're not frightened of the word no, you'll ask for anything. It's so
Good
true.
advice.
So true. Yeah.
It's so basic and so simple. And what we're frightened of, if someone says no, it was a no because you didn't ask. Because if you don't ask, it's going to be a no.
Yeah.
So,
and I bet nobody said no, did they, Chris? This is the thing that we get a lot of. What if they say no? Invariably, the only no I think you sometimes get is a no for right now, but not a no for next month. So you might catch somebody who's just swamped with their diary and they can't quite make space for you immediately or next week. But I've not had anybody get that sort of, you want to come and speak to me for advice? You want to come and get some guidance from me? Absolutely not. People just don't really say no. It's just we think they're going to say no. Was that your experience?
Exactly that. And interesting, the people that you have around you. Often in a swimming club, you will have parents who are all professionals in their own trade. They will often, so I was swimming at the City of Newcastle and just started reaching out to a few parents who I knew were in positions of either really interesting positions or positions of influence who would maybe point me in the right direction or even bring me in to do pieces of work. At that time, I was just really honest and open with them. I said, look, I feel as though I've got a lot to give. I just don't know how to package it and kind of put it into a quantifiable title. And just being honest with people, I think, is really refreshing. It's really refreshing. I think we all tend to put on these labels, these badges, and these titles. We go out in nice cars and fancy clothes, but actually, deep down inside, there's a lot of people actually really scared to be honest and open. And I've always been really forthcoming. I think that's been refreshing. I think for a lot of people, that was refreshing. But yeah, just reaching out to those contacts and those networks and just saying, look, I don't know where I want the next phase to go, but I know I've got this. And answer your question, James, on that front, when you said, oh, what if I don't like it? What if it's not something I want to do? Actually, if you go with the notion, you go out there with the notion of just staying in the moment and giving it your all, whatever you're doing, even if it's cleaning a floor, washing, it doesn't matter. Give everything you've got, like the best floor cleaner on the planet. I promise doors just start opening, and they do.
Yeah.
Because you turn up with your whole self and you show people who you truly are then.
100%. And I think going back to the renewable energies point is another powerful insight for people, because again, it's so easy to dismiss things. Oh, well, listen to Chris. It's all like he's got his swimming business, his coaching, he's a speaker. It's okay for him. He's landed in this perfect post-career scenario. But then there's that one little insight. Well, actually, I went into renewable energy. Didn't know much about that. Made a success of it. But that's not where you are now. So obviously, there's a perfect example of where you went in with an open mind, as you said, with the right attitude, but recognized it wasn't perfect, stepped out of that and continued on your journey. So I think it's important just to sort of highlight that it's not that you finished swimming and those things that you're doing now just magically morphed into place on day one. And you had to do something perhaps that was identified, not the long-term solution, and you stepped out of it, which I think is a fair assessment, isn't it?
It really is. My learn to swim business was an idea that we had that I wanted to start for such a long time, but just didn't have the confidence. I didn't have the confidence. And it was actually in a primary school down in Kent where a kid asked me, what do I want to do now? In front of everyone. And I went, I want to start a learn to swim business. And I'd just been talking about dreaming big, starting small, and not being frightened of your fears or anything like that. And this kid must have been only about 7, just coached the hell out of us for 3 minutes.
He's outed you.
It was awful, but it was liberating. And he kept asking, "Well, what's the reason for that? What's it?" And I was like, and eventually I went, "Because I'm scared." And the whole audience were like, "Oh,
yeah."
You could have heard a pin drop.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I started then putting plans in motion and started to get things moving. And I remember about 5 months after that, I went into a secondary school up around our local area. Teacher asked me, what do you want to do? And I just said, look, I want to start my own learn to swim business. And she walked me through the building. She went, come here, come and have a look at this. She walked me through the PE block, straight out the back of the school. And there was a 25-meter 5-lane pool. And she said, that does nothing pretty much after 4 o'clock. Do you want it?
Wow.
Oh, she was like, yeah, just get an agreement with the school. I can put you in touch with the right people and get you moving. And that's how it started. And now we see 1,000 kids every single week and have done for the last 10 years. Was our birthday in September. So
wow.
just
Congratulations. And isn't that awesome, Chris? Because whatever you believe in, whether you're particularly spiritual or not, and you think about the universe, you can't deny the fact that when you articulate something that you're focused on, a dream, a goal, that doors start to open. So if you'd have just stumbled through that, what do you want to do? I don't know. She would have never walked you through to that pool. The fact that you were able to say, I want to start a business, I want to coach kids, all of a sudden things start to happen. And it's really powerful, this, because something Cal and I were talking about this morning is a really high proportion of existing elite athletes, multidisciplines, are talking about the desire to start their own business, a passion to do something for themselves, but that fear factor's there. So did you start this business, Chris, post swimming career, or were you running it in tandem with your elite swimming, or was it something that you started once you'd sort of retired from the elite level?
So I started the Learn to Swim business after my career, so quite a few years actually. So 2014, so I'd been retired about 5 years,
Right.
6 years. Again, it's okay not to know. I spent a long time not knowing, even though I'd kind of secretly go, oh, I'd love to start that. I spent a lot of time not knowing, but still bringing in some really interesting and some really eclectic pieces of work, which were totally different. And little did I realize, whilst I didn't enjoy all of it, I was growing my skill set, growing my network, and I was able to adapt and be agile. And I think, athletes are really good at resilience. We're brilliant at resilience. And I think the skill we forget is being agile. When you come out of the sport, I think that's where you really need to dial up that agility and be able to move and adapt. The resilience bit is kind of, I suppose, we don't need resilience if we're agile.
Mm-hmm.
It's the skill that comes afterwards. If you're able to go, yeah, I'll do that. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but yeah, I'll put my hand up for that. And I've done that so many times. Just said yes, and then worked it out later. Crazy, how am I going to do this?
Yeah. Well, and that agility point, just to pick you up on that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but one of the challenges that we get is I can't set something up until I've retired. Now, in some cases, that's the case. If you wanted to be on the side of a pool coaching kids 10 hours a day and training at elite level 10 hours a day, you can't do both. However, we're trying to just get people to step into that sort of grey between the black and the white and say, but what could you do to start preparing? You can start to research, you can explore things, you can perhaps set a company up, you can educate yourself, you can fill in some of the gaps. It doesn't have to be, right, I've retired, now I can start looking at the next chapter. And knowing what you know now, having built that business, Chris, is that a fair assessment for you? Could you have, if you'd have had the right guidance perhaps, or someone just giving you a bit of a nudge, do you think you could have started it a bit earlier? Maybe in parallel with your career, maybe not, but do you think it could have been less than a few years after you retired that you kicked things off?
Yeah, I think so. I think I could have been scaffolding something as I was going through my career, if I'm being honest.
Right.
And I definitely look back and think I certainly don't regret anything because I'm not a person who regrets
No.
things. You look back and think, I wonder if I could have kind of brought that a little bit sooner, knowing what I know now. It was 100% around the knowing and the guidance. If I had that guidance and that knowing, yes, it wouldn't have been exactly what I wanted, but it would have been a start. And I think that's what stops a lot of people, especially athletes. We love perfection. We love perfection. So we want it to look like the end result. Well, if I think about when I started my business, it makes my toes curl. I cringe. I genuinely cringe. I cringe at me speaking business because what the heck I would have been saying in the first few just makes me want to die on the spot.
Yeah.
I cringe about me learn to swim business because it definitely didn't start for the first 2 years like it is now, with the processes, the systems, the payment links. There's a machine behind it now, where before we were just taking cash on the door, names on a piece of paper, all things like GDPR nightmare back then.
Yeah.
But I think there's something in that as well. It's been willing to start again. I think that's a big skill, being willing to start again. It's something, and it's okay to be a novice and it's okay to get it wrong. It's not perfect.
Yeah. And that's because there's no judgment from us, Chris, but when we talk one-on-one with people, nobody can compete or train 24/7. We all know the importance of recovery, and that is absolutely critical, and we can never move away from that. But then there's that blurred line when we go beyond sort of essential recovery, and it's then just in certain sports, hanging out at the coffee shop or watching a few more episodes on Netflix or playing on the Xbox, where recovery's just gone into, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do. I've got a bit of dead time, and so I'll fill it doing this. And it's those windows that I believe if you can find people to reach out to, as you say, it doesn't have to be physically arduous. You can meet them for a coffee. You can start exploring, what am I into? What am I not into? And maximizing those recovery windows. I think that's one of the big messages that we're relaying, because a lot of your research and building of that business, as you say, could have started, couldn't it? You couldn't be in two places at once, but a lot of that research could have started on your recovery during days when you weren't in the pool. I'm not saying to the detriment of recovery, but there was time there when you look back that you could have allocated.
Well, interesting. There was a one of the people in our team called Phil Dix. He basically helped me scaffold my career. So met him in 2001, and he slowly started to help me get out there and start to learn to public speak. I didn't realize it at the time. He was really clever. He was such a pivotal part of the team. Great guy, and he got me doing little bits and pieces. Well, way outside my comfort zone. But again, just instead of sitting on the Xbox or sitting having a coffee, I was actually doing something, and it made us interesting and interested. And by the time I realized, by the time I ended my career, I went straight into public speaking. Literally overnight, went into public speaking because I had this kind of lead in. I wasn't the best. I certainly wasn't the best. Like I say, I cringe at what I might have said and done. But I started to apply for roles that I would never, ever have thought of if I hadn't had that time with Phil.
There you go. Perfect illustration, isn't it? And the fact that you're saying you cringe, I think is so powerful for people to hear, because nobody steps into any world the finished article. And so we hear this a lot. And I'll talk to you about the first time you were in the pool, and you're going back to those days in Newcastle when you'd have had a talent, but you weren't an Olympian. You weren't a Commonwealth swimmer. It's impossible to drop in the water and just instantly be that. And it doesn't matter whether you're a hockey player, netball, rugby, football. We all evolve by working at our skills and developing and different insights and experience. So it's completely deluded then to think, well, I evolved as a sportsman or sportswoman, but I expect to be the finished article on day one when I start my next chapter. And therefore, it's completely reasonable. And I love the fact that you've highlighted it. You cringe when you look back. You'll cringe when you look at some old footage of you in your elite environment. But you got better and better in the same way whoever stood on a stage and was the perfect public speaker on day one. It doesn't happen. And I think that's where our ego gets in the way as well. If we can step back and say, well, I loved your analogy there. They're experiments. There's no right and wrong. There's no finish line. We're just trying to get better. And everybody goes through the same thing. So I think you've just, again, framed a wonderful fear for a lot of people. What if I'm not very good? Doesn't matter. Just keep going. You'll get better.
Absolutely.
No, I love it. So one, and again, this isn't talking specific numbers and isn't pointing the fingers at swimming as a sport, Chris. But I love to watch the Olympics. I love to watch the Commonwealth Games. I admire the discipline. My wife used to work on the periphery of this, and she used to meet parents and families, and she always talks about how moving it was to see the pride in parents when their children made it, because they knew the level of sacrifice. But I've always been cognizant of the fact, without knowing numbers, that you're not going to make a living a lot of the time in these Olympic disciplines. And quite the opposite. You have to self-fund, make a huge amount of sacrifices. And I wonder whether that has a positive to the negative that possibly makes people more proactive in thinking about life beyond the game, beyond their discipline. Because in some sports in the world, we know you can retire and possibly you're set up because you've earned so much income there. I don't know whether that's a thing or whether it's just swimming's attracted, as you've mentioned, some of your peers there, intellectual people who have respected their education, who are thinking ahead naturally. But does that sort of, I suppose, financial pressure keep you very keen on how can I prepare for the next chapter?
It does, and it's a double-edged sword. I think there is this kind of moving away and moving towards push and pull type of thing. But for me, it comes down to something really simple. Yes, there was a financial push because I needed to leave the sport and start to earn and make a living. But two, the most important one is I didn't want to do nothing with the rest of my career. I even think if I got enough to pay my mortgage off and live comfortably, if I had enough money to lean back on, I still would want to add something to society. I want to do something. I want to feel proud. I want to feel like, and it's nothing to do with title. It's more to do with what I lay down and being able to look back and say I'm satisfied and I've got something of value. Um, and that for me, I think is worth everything. So actually in chasing, yes, I do have to get some money in the door. Actually in chasing and pushing and evolving, whilst it's massively uncomfortable, and it is, you get the chance to look back at yourself and feel really proud, because the real gold is you. The real gold is the person going through the whole process of applying for a job, getting knocked back, um, thinking you've got that keynote nailed and you mess it up, or whatever it is. It's you as a person that you get to take everywhere. And that would be the thing I would urge people going through this process is you're not necessarily putting a full stop at the end of your career. It's just a comma.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that still goes on, and you can pick up the pen and write the chapter. It just may feel, look, and act a bit different in that next phase.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
It's just the turning of a page. Essentially all it is. I think you've just, again, you've picked up on some absolute beauties there, Chris. And I just want to dig into a few things that you mentioned. You mentioned the importance of Phil Dix in him getting you ready unintentionally. You didn't realize it was happening, but he prepared you for stepping out of swimming. You mentioned you wish you'd had a way of knowing and having some guidance. Was there anything in place from a UK swimming body standpoint? Any initiatives, any services that they would offer to elite swimmers that would help with this preparation for transition?
No, not really. At the time, it was the English Institute of Sport, which was kind of a wraparound service. So what would happen is when you become a world-class athlete and you're being lottery funded, you would get a bursary, which wasn't a lot of money to live on, and get by. And also there would be a pot of funding allocated for you to go to a strength and conditioning coach, speak to a sports psychologist, go and get physio treatment. You wouldn't see the money exchange hands. You would just book in appointments with these people who were in and around your services, so in and around Newcastle, and they were approved practitioners. And that's where Phil Dix was. He was one of the approved practitioners with the English Institute of Sport. And there was very little from British swimming. It just didn't work, like it didn't operate like that. I don't know what the deal is now. Maybe it's a bit different. I don't know. I see other elite athletes like Adam Peaty scaffolding the business and has been for a long time. AP Racing, it's fantastic. I watch kids go to it and just have the best time, just meeting him, the heroes, racing, doing swimming clinics, technique work, and nutrition talks to the parents, and all that sort of jazz. But actually, if you look at it, it's a very, very smart move from him. I don't know financially how it works, but essentially he puts his name to it. He works right in the business, and he's grown something that whenever that time's right, he can step into. I think it's a really smart move from an athlete who probably, well, he absolutely is he's our best athlete we've had, our best swimming athlete we've had in a long time. So when you look at that, you see some of the greatest ones in the sport are actually thinking about what that exit looks like. And at the same time, using and growing their network. It's a really smart move.
And I think that's one of the challenges, Chris, that it's not a criticism of swimming. I've been there, I've worked in rugby, and you're trying to juggle all things. You're trying to bring players in, you're trying to get players on the field with the best will in the world. You're supporting the welfare, but there's only so many hours in the day. So some disciplines will be better than others, some governing bodies, some clubs, some organizations. But I think there's a big onus on the individual, because that's 100% within your control. Even if there's not a lot going on for you from your club or your governing body, it's what can you do? You've mentioned Adam Peaty there. You're giving insights into what you've done. I think that's the benefit of these interviews, that people are hearing, well, here's someone that was successful, but they were proactive. They contacted their contacts. They got out there. They met people. And that is within everybody's gift to do. So even if you want to fall back, and I'm not being given a lot of guidance, okay, that's not ideal, but what can you do? What initiative can you take to start moving things forward.
Absolutely. I've been helping athletes as well myself. Just every now and again, athletes will reach out and they'll come on a mentoring program. I'll take them through a year or two, and it's amazing how we keep ourselves stuck in those patterns. We're all the same. I'm exactly the same. We just need to create a safe space with one person, even, or a handful of people, where we're able to download this stuff, put it in the middle of the room, and just let other people pick at it and just take our egos out of it, step back from it.
Yeah.
Tax, no personal thing, just and really have the mirror held up. When you do, you can see through a completely different lens. It's just creating that safe space where people go, is that really true? It's one of my favorite questions to ask. Is that really true?
Yeah.
You can see, well, it might not be true, but it's my truth. Right, your truth. Let's have a little look at a different truth then. Should we explore a different truth? And
and that's where the coaching, obviously that you're very adept at that, Chris, but I think that the concept of validation, so stepping away from ATA and stepping back in, my other work as a coach, I'm spending a lot of time with leaders as you are, and then now bringing that coaching hat into the athletes that we're working with. And it's so powerful and cathartic for people sometimes to hear that everybody's going through the same problems. So you're not alone. So if you're worried about, hang on, we've talked about one classic, well, I won't be very good, I'm not exactly sure what I want to do. That's okay. Nobody's asking you to sign a 25-year contract the day you finish in your sport. You can try things and you can reverse out and try something else. And I think so many people internalize the pressures. And as you say, when you get them in a safe space and people hear, I cringe doing things, or I struggled with this and I struggled with that, I think that element of, oh, right, I'm not on my own then, is very powerful. And I think that probably takes us into a next area. We always say to people, I know you're not someone who has regrets, and there's a mindset very much of life's life and it teaches us what it teaches us. But I think there is a value in almost looking at the do's and don'ts. When you're looking back to Chris, the elite swimmer, stepping into where you are now, if you had a room of those young swimmers out there and you were sort of giving them a couple of touch points to say, look, here's a couple of things I'd really recommend you do to accelerate your transition into the next chapter. And perhaps here's a couple of things that I'd recommend you don't do to feed into that same question.
Yeah, I think if I start with the do's, it's really quite straightforward. We mentioned it earlier on, is just start prepping early. It doesn't have to be overbearing. It doesn't have to be 100 miles an hour. Just 1% of your time that, if you allocate to it, can start to grow into something wonderful. I think just reflecting on the transferable skills as well and taking a little bit of time to do that leads us on to the third one. Do it with someone like a mentor or a coach or someone that you really respect, and maybe someone outside the sport. One thing I did when I left swimming was I started looking at people outside the sport to help mentor and coaches, because I didn't want to be treated like Chris the swimmer, because I wasn't Chris the swimmer anymore.
Right.
And I needed to break away from that ever so slightly, loosen it up and find out who I really was. And so there's a real identity shift, and that involves working with people who wouldn't treat me like they knew me, which was great. So it was a blank slate. I think there has to be this leaning into continuous learning, and it be okay that you're a rookie again and you start and just go, I don't know the answer to that. I've got the confidence now in the boardroom. I'm a non-exec director of in a board, and again, I put my hand up and I'll often go, what could someone just tell me what that acronym is, or what those numbers mean? And you can see someone next to us go, thank God he asked that.
Yeah, exactly. No question's a stupid question.
Exactly. So I am the token idiot in most rooms, and I'm quite willing to play that role, and I'm not frightened. And I think there's a skill in that, and there's a richness comes to your team when someone just goes, I have no idea what that is. Can we just pause a second? So just learning to be a rookie again. I think I've mentioned it a couple of times. Embracing those new opportunities is what the experimentation's all about. Just trying it and not being frightened of it. And if it doesn't work, that's okay, because you've still got the experience of, it's best to know what you definitely don't want to do. I know there's at least 5 things that I definitely don't want to do because I've tried them.
Exactly.
So I kind of tick them off the list, and then just give yourself time, I think, is the last do. Is, this stuff takes time to work through, and there's no finish line, there's no deadline to hit. it just takes time. I'm 45 now, and there's still moments I think, what am I going to do when I grow up? I still think that.
Yeah.
I still say that to myself. I think the don'ts link to it. If I reverse it, don't rush it. Don't rush it. There's no need to rush it. And as well, probably the one thing that we've not spoken about, or maybe just touched upon, is just don't underestimate the emotional side of it. There was a phrase that started me off on my journey of getting out of my pity party, if you like, because I was feeling sorry for myself. I was on a bit of a downward spiral when I left swimming because of the emotions around it. And it was nobody's coming to save you.
Mm-hmm.
I remember somebody said it, and I was just, at first, I was like, oh, that one hurt. And if I go back to when my granddad was alive, he'd say, look, if you triggered, there's something in it for you, not them. We can talk about the tone they used and talk about how they shouldn't have said it. But if you've taken it away and you're ruminating on it, there's something in it. Open it up. There's gold in there for you. You've just got to be brave. If you're triggered, look into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That emotional side for me, when someone said, no one's coming to save you, Chris, I was like, poof. But it fueled me once I really took on board what it was actually saying. I didn't fear it once I got beyond it. And I started to go, yeah, actually, I can do this. No one's coming to save the day.
Yeah. It's a sense of ownership, isn't it? And again, we're both, on very much on the same page there, Chris, from that coaching perspective. But there's a security blanket of thinking someone is coming to save you, or someone will find the solution, someone will tell me exactly what to do, which as elite athletes, one of the upsides is it's very structured. One of the downsides is you don't have to think as much, because people say, be in the gym at this time, be in the pool at that time, be on the field of play at this time, be in the classroom at this time. And then all of a sudden that structure falls away, and you're hoping that someone will come along and say, if I just do this, this, and this, will I get an outcome? Well, actually, it's intimidating to start with, but as you say, there's a lot of power in that to say, well, I'm not restricted by that structure anymore. I think that's a fabulous set of do's and don'ts, absolute gold dust in that. And I suppose just one of the things you've talked about a couple of times is transferable skills, which I think I'm intrigued as to your perception on that, because I think athletes are sometimes a little bit blind of the qualities that they've already got, that they've spent many years honing, that will stand them in great stead in whatever they want to do next. And they need that almost highlighting to them. So in your experience, what would you say are some of the transferable skills that have served you well, that you perhaps honed in the pool, but you've brought into your life after that chapter?
Yeah, I mean, there's the good old classic, the discipline. I get up at silly o'clock still, just because I love it. I don't do it because I'm pushed to do it. I get up, I do a gym session, I start emails, I start invoices, I think of ideas and where I want to take business next. I love doing that, especially because at that time in the morning, it's stupid o'clock, people don't respond to you. So you get all your jobs done without anybody calling or anybody.
Exactly.
Yep.
Brilliant. And then now and again, you'll get I send you another email response going, what are you doing up at this time? But I do it for practical reasons, but I also do it because I'm still in that pattern. And I just love that time of the day. I love that time of the day. It makes us knock off work a little bit later in the day, earlier in the day, so I can get rest, all that sort of stuff. So for me, there was the kind of practical discipline element. And then there was the hidden one that I didn't realize was there. And it only dawned on us about 5 years into retiring. All the way throughout my life, people have said, oh, Chris, you're too sensitive. You're far too sensitive. And I used to constantly hear it. It was in earshot. Oh, Cookie over there, he's dead sensitive. Constantly. And actually, that's become my superpower, if I'm being really honest.
Okay.
I can tune into a room. I can read a room. I didn't even know it was a skill. But I can feel stuff that's happening in the room, even though the words aren't being said. Again, I didn't know it was something. I didn't even know it was a skill that's applicable. But actually, the further up the chain I'm going, the more I'm realizing actually that's a really, really powerful skill, especially when you get to senior leadership and management and you get around a board table. Because I didn't understand this until I started working in that emotional intelligence space, is actually the higher up the chain you go, the less self-aware people generally tend to become.
Yeah,
more strategic. They tend not to bring people with them. They tend to kind of put things onto people. And And yes, that is part of a role at times, especially if you're trying to salvage something and move quickly in this quick-paced environment that we live in. But actually, this what people call the soft skills, the emotional intelligence skills, I call them power skills. They are power skills, and they power up all of the other skills. And that's the one thing that I've actually started in the last 7 years, really to come into my own on. It's easy to go, oh, I'm not very good at that, or yeah, I'm learning still. But it's not so easy to go, no, I think I'm really good at that, and I'm going to get better. And
No, I think it's fascinating how you're blending this all together. The discipline one, it is an obvious one, but actually, it's a really powerful one because one of the things that often I find people struggle with is building the right habits. I want to be healthier, or I want to be more present as a dad or a mum, or I want to be better in my relationship, or I'd love to develop a new skill. But invariably, the pushback is I haven't got time. And again, without going on a huge tangent, when you unpick that and you look at maybe the daily updates on the mobile phone and time spent on social media or scrolling or watching television, there is time in there, but you've got to have the discipline to carve out the time to be able to grow. And so you then perfectly illustrated, well, a lot of people find early mornings, particularly if you've got kids, pets, demands before you even get into work, it's a great place to be be highly productive, but it takes a bit of discipline. It's not easy to be able to get up early. The bed's comfortable, the snooze button's attractive. But Carl, you were talking about discipline just earlier today, weren't we? You came across something with who was it that you were talking
Ian
about?
Thorpe.
Ian Thorpe, that was
Ian Thorpe, yeah. Chris probably knows this. He was interviewed not so long back, and they were talking about skills and traits. What were some of the things he learned? How did he become an Olympic champion? And he was talking about discipline. For him, his mindset, he is one of the most disciplined individuals he knows. And he went back to how he developed the discipline, and it was from his dad. And his dad gave him two rules when he was a kid. One was, I don't care what sport it is you do, but if you start the season, you finish the season. And if at the end of the season you're done, that's fine. You don't have to do it anymore. But if you make a commitment, finish it. And secondly, when Ian fell in love with swimming and realized he was bloody good at it, his dad said, I don't mind taking you to training at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, but I am not going to come and wake you up to take you.
Brilliant.
If you want to go swimming and you want to train, you have to get me up and I will then take you to training.
Yeah.
And I don't know, 3:30 in the morning, a 12-year-old, 13-year-old is having to wake up to wake his dad up to say, I need to go training now. That's one way of developing discipline. I tell you, it's such a powerful story.
Yeah, it is, and I've heard similar stories before from other Olympians. That ultimatum, that kind of look, it's on you. And I think it's absolutely spot on. Just like even my son, I'm like, look, it's your bag, it's not my kit. Come over and go. He hasn't got his water bottle. I'm like, has he not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You want me go speak to him? Like, he's the swimmer, not me. I mean, if he wants me to do a job, ask me to do a job, I'll help you out, no problem, and we'll pay for the kit. We'll buy the kit. But you're spot on. I think taking ownership of your own journey, it gets the thinking, it gets the synapses working, it gets all those things. That you start to build, and actually they become second nature. They become subconscious. You take it from the conscious mind, you put it in the subconscious, and you just do it. You don't even think about it. It's like breathing, blinking. It just becomes automatic. I think there's to be said for that.
And I think you've touched on that discipline, that ability to keep improving, that ability to feel uncomfortable. And one thing you mentioned right at the start of our conversation today, you mentioned about sharpening the axe and preparing to deal with adversity. I think that's something else worth just touching on, Chris, because you've got children, I've got children, you're trying to prepare them for life. There is no smooth upward staircase all the way to the top. You'll go for job interviews, you'll not get them. You'll have, relationships that work and some that don't work. Life is a series of highs and lows, of peaks and troughs, whatever the analogy is. We can't avoid adversity and challenge. And in my experience, sweeping generalization, but most athletes that Carl and I are speaking to have had to navigate some real adversity. There's for a lot of people, there's a selection process every single week, and you're in or you're out. the performance, when it's good or bad, is often on live television, and then you've got people sitting in a comfortable studio rewinding slow motion, assess it. So it's a very intense environment. So a lot of them are aware of it, obviously, but that ability to move through adversity and not be almost, paralyzed by criticism and negativity, and find that I can pick up my tools and get back to work and do it again and try and improve. That's a great thing to develop, to bring into life after sport, isn't it? Is that something that you were sort of nodding towards when you said about sharpening the axe?
Absolutely. Like even today, like I had some bad news in business, and I was like, I really hit us this morning. Since coming on here and even the hour beforehand, I've already written a plan of what I'm going to do about it. So, yes, I do have that emotional explosion. I'm quite an emotive guy, but I know myself well enough now that that's just a reaction. That's all it is. It's just a reaction. And actually, once the response comes through, you see the real me come out, which is that person who's like, I love to win. I love to make a move. I see business as a chess game, and that's, I'm just moving pieces. That's all I'm doing. But I always come back to trying not to compare yourself as well. I think that comes. I think that it's human nature, even more so now in this world where everything seems to be visually comparable. We've got them on our phones. We're reminded of it every second of every day. And I think that becomes this kind of, dare I say it, this slippery slope for a lot of people of, I'll never be that. And we forget where we've come from. We forget how we talk.
Yeah.
And we do that kind of sweeping thing over a year where we go, oh, 2006 was a brilliant year. Yeah, chances are it's because you won a gold medal or you broke a record. I bet if you went back, and I used to do this, look at my logbook, it was horrific. The year that I won Commonwealths was horrific. Yet when I look back, I go, oh my, I was unstoppable then. Oh, that was an amazing year. Because they defined it by a medal or a couple of times.
Yeah.
The adversity is always happening constantly.
Exactly. Yep. No, you're absolutely right, Chris. And that is a universal. Athletes, non-athletes, were locked in a world of external validation rather than looking within. And funny, I always use the sporting analogy of trying to beat your own PB. And that's something that's very ingrained for you as a swimmer, no doubt. You'll have known all your best times. And yes, the Olympic gold, the Commonwealth gold is an ultimate. The world records is an ultimate. But beating your own PB, whenever I watch the Olympics or anything, I always say if someone beats their own PB, well, there's not a lot more you can do. That's the best you've ever done, irrespective how that compares, whether you finish last or you're on the medal podium. You've just recorded your best ever time. And I like the notion of keep trying to move your own PB forward in everything that you do. So you're getting a little bit better, irrespective if someone's just set a world record. It doesn't matter. Move your PB forward.
And you've got to I think you've alluded to it there. You've got to redefine what success looks like. Because in sport, it is fairly black and white. You win or lose. You fast or last. Of course, you say that you're either fast or last in this game. And if you're coming into this game, there's more kicks up the butt than there are gold medals. And if you can handle that, you're 3/4 of the way there. And he's spot. I think when you come into business or you come into running your own business, you've got to define what success looks like. And you've got to spend those times reflecting as well. I don't think we reflect enough in business in general. In sport, we do it a lot. We sit there, we analyze games, we look back over, we analyze performances, we break them down into tiny chunks. Business, we don't. We tend to just go, all right, I've got far too much to do, too many emails. We don't spend that time sharpening the axe and going, hang on a second, what do we need to let go of here? What's not working for us? What resistance can we take away? Because actually, it's not always about working harder. Sometimes it's about kind of slowing down in order to kind of speed things up. And in order to do that, we need that reflection time. Rarely happens in the businesses I work in. If I say, what reflection time have you put in this week in your personal diary that nobody else can put a meeting invite in? People would kind of look at us as though I've just asked them the most ridiculous question.
Doesn't exist. Absolutely.
They look at the tiles, they look at their shoes, look anywhere but in my eyes.
And that reflection time probably just ties in with another skill that you carry forward. And that for me is the ability to reflect and be comfortable giving and taking feedback. And so again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Chris, but I imagine that over that decade plus in the pool, you're constantly assessing performance, and there'll be things that are going well and not going well. And there'll have been coaches around you that are telling you what's not going well and what's going well. but it's not a personal attack on Chris Cook. It's not an insult of your family heritage. It's an ability to call a spade and get to the nub of the issue. And that is a skill to carry forward into business, because I'm sure you're seeing this as well. I certainly see a lot of environments where people are just not very good at being able to give and take feedback. They take it personally. And so we don't reflect properly, we don't learn properly, and we don't move forward particularly strategically. Would you concur with that in terms of your environment and that constant feedback loop that you would have been a part of?
Absolutely. Without feedback, you have no eyes on it. You want to invite extra eyes on your performance. That's what you want, because you've only got one viewpoint, which is down that lane. That's all you've got. And yes, you can bring in other things, but actually, if you don't invite other perspectives, you don't develop a diverse performance mindset. I'll give you a classic example. I've got a business partner called Lisa Morrison. We work together on all sorts of various projects, and she hates that word feedback. A couple of years ago when we started working together, I'd say, "Oh, I've got some feedback." And I'd say, "Sit bolt right up," and I'd change. Okay, she'd prepare us.
Here we go.
Yeah. Okay, go for it. Yeah, I'm ready. And I'm like, "Oh, it was an interesting kind of shuffle around and stuff." And then one day, I just changed the word to opportunity. We were working together, and I said, "Oh, by the way, Lisa, I think I've spotted an opportunity." Gosh, she grabbed that pen so quick. She went, "Go for it." I went. And I started telling her it was just the same feedback. I just used a different word.
Yeah.
Interesting. We've done that. Both me and Lisa have done that. She cottoned on. She's really smart. She cottoned on to it. And we do that with people now. We will, instead of saying, "Oh, we've got some feedback," we'll say, "Oh, I think I've spotted an opportunity. If you've got 5 minutes." Oh my God, they've got more than 5 minutes for opportunities.
I love it. I love it. It's the classic reframe, isn't it? I think that's fabulous, Chris. So one of the things we always say towards the end of an interview, you took the words out of our mouth there, because you're talking about the importance of framing success. So now you've got multiple hats. You're heavily involved in the leadership and the emotional intelligence work. You've got the public speaking, you've got the swimming school, etc. What does success look like for Chris in this chapter? What are you shooting towards? How would you articulate that, just to give that final sort of insight to the listeners?
From a development point of view in my professional life, I'll start with, it would look like taking on more of a strategic role. When you grow in a business and you grow in businesses, really easy to roll your sleeves up and be doing things. You say things like, "Oh, it takes me 5 minutes to do and an hour to explain." I was constantly saying that.
Yeah.
So I'm really leaning into that and learning a lot about actually empowering other people, and I'm enjoying that. So from a professional point of view, I want to take more of a strategic role. And I've got my eye on a handful of opportunities that I'm moving into now. And one of them is a non-exec director. From a personal point of view, I've got a growing family. I've got a 13-year-old girl and a 10-year-old boy. They love the sport. They're good, just great human beings, bless them. And we've just got a great little family unit. And I just want to see them grow and develop and just be the best they can be. I know it sounds cheesy, but I really don't care.
Not at all.
It's the one thing that when I started a family, I just didn't think we'd get to that point where there were little humans making their own decisions. I don't know why I didn't think. I just want to see them grow. And then from, I guess, a lifestyle point of view, would just be to just keep on going the way we're going. I feel as though we're in a good place. I need to just lay back a little bit and just accept that actually there's no such thing as perfection. I struggle with that, if I'm being perfectly honest. So that lifestyle point of view, I want to take a little bit more downtime, get a camper van, and just spend a little bit more time just chilling a bit, because I'm constantly thinking about what's next.
Yeah.
That's the athlete.
It is. But it doesn't always serve us, does it? So I want to work on that.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely way to finish. Carl, is there anything else that you want to ask? I think we've covered a phenomenal amount of.
Yeah, it's all been covered. I've just really loved sitting here. I feel like I've just watched the documentary. I've just sat here listening. It's been fantastic. Yeah, really fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
I'd echo that, Chris. Really, really powerful stuff, and so many takeaways. I think the big takeaway for me, if I hope that people are listening to this and reflecting, that it's never too early to start preparing. Be comfortable cringing at yourself and knowing that you're not going to be perfect. Rule things out as well as ruling things in. Be proactive and get out there within your contact base and lean into those superpowers, that discipline that exists. You've alluded to that emotional intelligence piece. Everybody's got those strengths. So think about what you're passionate about and how you can align the strengths with those passions. So it's been a fascinating conversation. So Chris, there's a lot going on for you there, but if people wanted to connect with you, where would they find you? Where's the best place to find Chris Cook?
So my website is chriscookgb.com. Email address is in there, and I'm all over LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. So yeah, just go searching for me on LinkedIn. I'm putting a post up nearly every day. I love it.
Perfect. Chris, I'm sure everyone will be reaching out to you there. It's been an absolute pleasure. Wish you the very best of luck with all these hats and get that camper van bought so there is a bit of downtime. We'll be keeping an eye on that, looking out for posts on that. But thanks for your time today.
Cheers, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us this week on our ATA podcast. If you found this conversation insightful and it resonates with your journey, please subscribe, follow the show, and stay connected with us for more insight, resources, and information on how we at ATA are supporting your preparation for life beyond the game.